Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you real quick how you can host your FlutterFlow web application on Firebase. This allows you to also get free custom domain. You can link it to that hosting. Now, a couple of reasons why you may want to do that is because currently FlutterFlow allows you to get one linked domain or ability to link a single domain and host your web app on the paid plan. But if you want to upgrade and probably like link more applications, you need to still pay a subscription of about $7 a month. So these are the kind of things you are going to bypass with that. And then this also gives you utmost control, like you can inject things into your application while you do the deployment. So in this video, I'm going to cover real quick how you can build on FlutterFlow. You integrate with GitHub, like you push your code to GitHub, and then from GitHub we have a continuous deployment that deploys to Firestore hosting. Now, this is just briefly how it looks like. So we're going to have our FlutterFlow application here that we push the code to GitHub. If there are any modifications that we want to make to the code, we have ability to do that. And from GitHub, when we push immediately, it's also going to push to Firestore hosting, and we'll have our application hosted. Anyways, if you think this video is going to be helpful to you, please stick around, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, please. It really helps me to grow, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're supposed to do is to get to our application, right? So this application that I have here is the FlutterFlow updates application that I have. For a while now, I've not been doing updates, but yeah, so you're going to try to deploy this application. So our entry page, you want to make sure that your application is enabled like the platforms. We have web enabled because that's what is going to give you the ability to publish to web. And one thing I want to make sure is your home page, like the configuration of your app, your entry page is set up correctly, right? Currently, my entry page is set to home page, but I don't like the way this home page looks, so I'm going to try building a simple landing page for my FlutterFlow updates. So I'm going to do that with the FlutterFlow AI helper. Let me see, new page creation. So we have this page generated. I don't know, I think it looks good. I'm just going to try inserting an image here. Let me search for Nocode because I think that is going to give us results. And let's insert, say, this image. Let me take this one for example, right? And let's make it to fill the whole width. All right, something like this, and alignment. So let me say center. Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's just say, for example, like this is the page that I want to use as our deployment page. We give this an infinite width, so that I think it's inside a row, so I'm going to give it like full, yeah, expansion. So yeah, I think this doesn't look bad, but this is going to be our new entry page. And then change our entry page here to be that home that we've just created. This is it, home. Right, so I think I like the way it is right now, and this is everything that we need for this page to work properly. So finish our development on FlutterFlow, and now we want to push to Firestore. Initially, one way of doing this is if you can download the code. Right, you download the code and run commands on your terminal manually to do all of these updates, to do all of the deployments. But what I'm going to show you is how to use GitHub, right, to automate all of this deployment process. So right here, we are going to come down here onto our integration tab and then GitHub. If you don't have a GitHub account, you need to set up one. So I need to go to the FlutterFlow web to be able to get that. Now, to link my GitHub repository, all I need is the URL for the repository, then I can associate it. So I'm going to head over to my GitHub account. This is GitHub, and I'll create, if you don't have one, you can create a GitHub account. It is free. So I'm going to create a new repository, and I'm going to call that repository FlutterFlow updates. And I'm going to make it a public repository. I don't need all of this. That's all I need to do. But if your application is private, something that I don't want to share to the public or anything, you can make it a private repo. Then I'm going to create that repository, and that is all I need to do. So after creating my repository, I need to make sure that I have installed the FlutterFlow GitHub app to the repository, right? So if you click on this link, it's going to open the FlutterFlow GitHub app, and here you can click on configure, and in that configuration, select the repository that we have just created. So in that configuration, I'm also going to add another repository, this new one that we have created called the FlutterFlow update. This is it, FlutterFlow updates. So I'm just going to add and then give it access and then save. So this FlutterFlow GitHub app has access to that repository that we just created. Now over here on FlutterFlow, you need to paste this URL right? This URL to the repository is at github.com/this, right? I'm going to copy it from my URL bar and I'll paste it over here on FlutterFlow. This is a repository, and I just click on associate repo. Then it's going to ask me to sign in with GitHub, and when I sign in, that association will be completed. Now the repository has been associated, and each time that I make changes into my application, if I want to push to GitHub, I just need to press on this button, push to repository, and it will push to my GitHub. So updating latest FlutterFlow, yeah, I'm just going to leave this commit message to be like that, and I'm going to push to FlutterFlow. Now, when that is done, we should see our code, all of our Flutter code imported here on GitHub. So real quick, I noticed something weird. I was unable to push the FlutterFlow update projects because of a couple of errors. So I just switched to this test error project that I have. This is just another project that I use for testing purposes, right? And I linked out the GitHub repository just like we did, and I've pushed and successfully went to GitHub. Now over here on GitHub, FlutterFlow is going to push to the FlutterFlow branch. So it's going to create its own branch called FlutterFlow and push all the code to that particular branch. So what we want to do is we need to set up, it's our decision, like, do we want to deploy when FlutterFlow automatically push to this FlutterFlow branch, or we want to deploy to another branch. So I'm going to create a branch from this FlutterFlow branch that we already have. So I'll click on this drop down here. You can see you have FlutterFlow. We're currently on FlutterFlow, and then to create a branch, click on this drop down and say view all branches. This is going to display the list of branches that we have, which currently is just main and the FlutterFlow branch. So I'll click on new branch, and then I'll just say it deploy, or let me call it live instead, right? Let's just call it live. And the source of this branch, I want it to come from FlutterFlow. So I want this branch to be created from the FlutterFlow branch. So I'm going to create a new branch, and now that new branch has been created, right? Live is derived from FlutterFlow. So at each point, GitHub is going to always make sure that it checks the changes between those two branches to try to compare them. Right now, everything matches. Now I'm going to ignore that warning that was showing, right? Because it's asking me to create a pull request to the main branch, because the main branch is the primary branch on this repository. So I'm going to ignore that. And at each time, if we push, let's say we go over here to FlutterFlow, and let me click on, let me just add. So I'll modify this text to get in touch with us, and I'm just going to push again to that repository. So this should create a new commit into our repository under the FlutterFlow branch. So I can set a commit message, modified home page. Now over here on GitHub, you are going to see this new commit that we just made, modified home page. Now we also need that commit to go to this main branch. That is the reason why I want this live branch. That's the reason I want us to create a new branch, because at some time you may not want to interrupt or interfere with the code that FlutterFlow is exporting to GitHub, right? So you want to modify your own code or add something or whatsoever under your own branch. So this is where that comes in play. Let's take for example, we have modified something here. Then when we push onto that FlutterFlow branch, then we can try to like sync the two branches together, right? So we can open up a pull request between this branch and this our live branch and the FlutterFlow branch, so that it brings in those new changes. So I'm taking it into live from FlutterFlow. That's just basically what you need to do every time. So what I'm simply checking here, I'm checking the ability for FlutterFlow branch to merge to live. So this is able to merge. I'm just going to create a pull request and merge. The reason I'm doing all of this, please just bear with me, is just showing you guys the best practices, right? The best practices on how you need to be handling this kind of situation. Otherwise, you can just push the FlutterFlow branch directly to deployment without having to do all of these modifications. So I'm going to create create this pull request and merge it. Now let's move over to the next step. So we've done setting up our FlutterFlow application, right? And we are able to push to GitHub. Now we need to configure continuous integration and continuous deployment onto Firestore hosting, right? There is this intermediary that we need to do here, so that each time that we push to GitHub, it goes to Firestore and automatically deploys. So this is what we need to do. By the way, to avoid this confusion of multiple branches, I want to change my default branch to the FlutterFlow branch, right? And then I'll delete the main branch just so we don't get confused, so that we are left with just the FlutterFlow and the live branch. All right, let's head over to Firebase and see what we need to do in order to be able to deploy it. So this is a Firebase project that I have opened here, FlutterFlow updates, and the corresponding project on the Google Cloud Console. So what I need to do is go head over to I am an admin, right? And what we are doing here is we are trying to create a service account, right? A service account, and give the service account permissions to be able to host to Firebase hosting, right? So another parameter that we need is also going to be the project ID, right? The unique project ID, this one. So I'm going to copy this, and we need to create configurations on our GitHub repository that points or that makes use of these parameters. So let's head over here. Yeah, I'll come over here on settings. Then I'll create secrets. The importance of those secrets is to use them in my action that is going to be pushing this code from GitHub to this thing, Firebase hosting. So right here, let's come over to secrets. I want to create a secret for my actions, my GitHub actions. So I'll click here on actions, and right here is a repository secret. So I'm creating this secret particular just for this particular repository, FlutterFlow updates. So a new secret. Let me paste the project ID down here, and I'm going to call this secret Firebase project ID. Here we go, and I'm going to add the secret. Now I'm also going to create a service account and come and add it here as a secret. So let's proceed with creating that service account. Right here, I am. Then the next thing I want to do is come here on service accounts. Then I'll create a new service account, and I'm going to call it, say, Firestore deploy. And I'm going to create and continue, and then the access that I wanted to get to this project, so the various roles that I need this service account to get is just enough roles to be able to do Firebase hosting. So the role that I'm going to give it, I'm going to search here. It is Firebase hosting admin. So as you can see, this one, I'll add this role, then I'm done creating this service account. Now after creating the service account, as you can see, this is it down here, Firestore deploy. I'll click on the right here, and I'll generate a new token, a new key for it. So I'm going to say manage keys, and it's going to open up this interface where I can generate a new key. That particular key, the JSON key, is what we need to use on GitHub. So I'll click here on add key, create new key, and it's a JSON key, create. Now you need to keep this store this in a safe location, so that people will not be able to access it, or somebody will not be able to access that key. So I'm going to save mine here. When I open this key, I should be able to see this JSON, right? And that JSON is what I need to copy and paste inside my GitHub configuration. So let me open this file. This is the JSON contents of that key that we've just downloaded. So I'll come over here on GitHub, and I'll create a new secret. So I'm going to add a new repository secret, and this time I'm going to call it Firebase service account, and let's paste all of the contents of this JSON into that key. So I'm going to add secret, and we are done with all the configuration that we need from GitHub ends. Now the next thing we need to do is to create our action, right? An action is just a set of instructions that you're telling GitHub to execute. Maybe you can tell GitHub, like, when I push to this repository, do this. When somebody comments, do this. When this kind of thing happen, a set of steps that GitHub should take. So on our repository here, I'll click on this action tab and switch over to the list of actions that we have. And right here, we are open to this, like the list of various GitHub actions that we can copy. So I want to set up my workflow myself, and this is going to bring us an interface that we need to configure all of that. So I have this workflow listed out here, and let me explain to you what it does briefly. So this is a workflow that we are going to be using right here. What this workflow does is it simply just listens on the main branch, in which for us it's going to be live, the live branch, right? It listens for push requests when a push has been made to this particular branch inside this path. Now the reason why I specify this lib directory is because this is where like all the main files relating to your project exist. So when changes have been made there, let me comment or even remove all of these other things. So when changes have been made there inside this file, any file inside here, then all of this execution, all of these jobs should run. So we have the first one we build for web, and the second one we deploy to cloud Firestore hosting. I'm going to explain that real quick. So this way we have to paste our contents here, and I'm going to just call that our action or our workflow. I'm calling it deploy.yml. If you want the contents of this file, it is available on my Buy Me a Coffee, so you can find all of the contents, and also this section down here. I'm going to talk about it. This is what you need to use in your application when you are deploying. Okay, so we have this, and let me copy this corresponding code and let's just walk through it real quick. So what I'm doing is something like if you had to pull your code normally from FlutterFlow to your local environment, these are the steps that you need to handle on your own, but this is going to happen automatically every time that you push to GitHub. So we are building for FlutterFlow web, right? This is the name of this job right here. Is our workflow is FlutterFlow Firebase deployment, whatever thing, and the first job that is going to execute is build the application for web. So what it does is it runs on Ubuntu latest. What it does, it checks out our code and everything, and it uses this Flutter version 3.2.3, which corresponds to the version in which this project is currently running, as you can see up here, version 3.27.3. So you need to make sure that it corresponds very well to avoid deployment errors or to avoid fails. Then it runs pub-get, it does a config for web, it does all of this code and executes it, and then after that is successful, before it can start deploying. That way, the way I've written the script, that way it doesn't cause any error, right? It doesn't cause any error, because if this build fails, then deployment will not go, but this deployment will only run if that build succeeds. So this is what we need to do. And right down here we have this repository token, which is by default available. It's our GitHub token. They have this service, Firebase service account. These are required parameters to run this deploy execution. So we specify our Firebase service account that we created as a secret, and the Firebase project ID that we created as a secret. Now in this channel we can choose which channel is a Firebase hosting configuration thingy. So I'm leaving it to live so that it pushes to live. This is what we need. This is the script that does all of that automation. So I'm going to commit this change, right? I'm saying just leave the default message to commit, and I'm committing directly into FlutterFlow branch, right? So let me show you real quick. So commit those changes. Again, usually it's very, very important. Make sure that your workflow actually ties to the particular branch that you are deploying from, right? This code that we have here in this workflow, this deploy.yml, make sure that it always ties to the particular branch that you are pushing from. So if by default you are just pushing from the local, the FlutterFlow branch, then FlutterFlow should be here instead of live. The next thing, like this second snippet of the code, is just some basic configuration that is important that you do. So what this does is what is really important is just specifying this public, right? So after we've done our Flutter build, the directory for where the web application actually lives is inside this build web. If you see the code, and you're going to understand what I mean if you've ever executed FlutterFlow code wrongly. Locally, sorry. So this is where we are specifying our public directory should be inside here after that code has executed, and we are cleaning all the URLs. Therefore, we don't want anything like /html or whatever thing. We are ignoring any files of this format, any Firebase or JSON file, any hidden file, and anything relating to node modules. And our header, we are just doing a simple cache of the JavaScript and CSS, so that it's going to make our page to load faster once users have already loaded it the first time. This is an important aspect, like why I want to also handle this thing. And this file is called JSON, Firebase.json. So let's create this file that holds all the configuration that we have in our application. So let's do that. Add file, create new file. Again, we are still working under the FlutterFlow branch. We are just going to simply migrate all of this into our live branch to start seeing it in action. So let me create the file. Is called Firebase.json, and I'm going to paste this content here. Then I'll simply commit the changes and just let it save as it is like this. And everything is ready. Let's test it out now. Now I've switched to this live branch, and it is telling us that we are 2 commits behind FlutterFlow. So what we can do is just simply create a pull request, right, and merge the change. And all of these 2 files that we added are going to be included into this our live branch. So right here we are good to go. Each time a change is made from FlutterFlow in any of these main files inside the lib, if you remember the GitHub, the action config, we specified anything inside here just so we are keeping track of major changes and not pushing every time. This is just to avoid breaking our deployment. So each time that something is made inside, a change is made inside this lib. So let's take, for example, I just come here and I say custom code. Let me just make a single file change, and you see how it's going to trigger that that deployment. And I have this simple custom action that says display value. What it does is simply just prints hello. And let me edit this file just by adding these 2 backticks. Again, this is inside the comments. When I commit changes, and immediately this gets saved into this our live branch, that action will be triggered. So the action will immediately start running to deploy to Firebase. As you can see here, it's showing pending. If I head over to this actions tab, you see this is update display value. This workflow is running because of that particular push that we have made to that branch, just like we specified in our workflow. So display value, if I expand it, you're going to see that right now it's currently executing one step after the other. The first step is to build, and the second step is to deploy our workflow. So it's running Flutter pub get. Then after I run Flutter config enable web, Flutter build web, it builds for web, then it holds that as an artifact that gets migrated to the next action that will be executed. That's a lot of explanation, but yeah, you get the point. So this is everything running here, and you don't have to manage this procedure. Now all of our action is done executing. If we head over here on FlutterFlow to the projects, and let's come here under hosting again, we should now see our application that is visible here, right? This is it now showing. So it is showing this is the app, and this is currently the URL to access it. So if I just click on this URL to open it, it should open FlutterFlow updates 5h whatever thing .web.app, which is being served to us by Firestore, by Firebase. I keep mixing this thing up. Right, this is the application. As you can see, let me bring this thing down so that I can see the URL. This is the URL, right? FlutterFlow updates that.web.app, which corresponds to this URL that was displayed here. So we have everything. You see, this is the app, and this is how you can deploy your app to Firestore. If you click, everything works. Again, I mentioned this app is just something that I use for my testing, and so these are a bunch of things. This is a rich text editor that I have. You can see a lot of things happening here. Everything is working very well as expected. So if I bold this, it's going to bold. If I change the color, it's going to change to maybe a bigger size. And this is just what makes our application, right? Now let's head over to, let's make a change from FlutterFlow. Let's say we want to change that home page. If I click on back, let's say I want to change this section to down here. Let me change this, send us a message button, or this, yeah, let me change it to something like red. Come down here, and I change this button. Let me change the color to something else. Primary, let's use secondary or tertiary, yeah, so that it'll be very, very visible. Send message. Now this is a change that has been made, and this change has been made inside this file. This file is located inside the lib directory already. Well, it's just a general change that was made on the project. Now the next thing is just simply to push on FlutterFlow. So I'm going to push to the repository to push. This change has come. Here we see update latest FlutterFlow output. Now if we simply just accept this change inside into our live branch, then it is going to automatically initiate that action. So let's accept it. So as you can see in the code here, this is a simple change that was made from primary to tertiary. The code is showing us that. Now, this is why I recommended we created a new branch, because if you look, for example, the firebase.json file that we created here is no longer there because FlutterFlow has overwritten everything. So that's why we need to create our branch that we are deploying from, so that we get the changes from FlutterFlow, add them to our own changes that we have or the changes that we are making, and then now we can now push or do whatever thing. This is how you generally want to work when you are mixing your code with FlutterFlows. So if I switch to my live branch and I click on this contribute here, to open a pull request or to try comparing. Let's say compare. Again, we want to compare what is coming from FlutterFlow to our own code. The reason I'm doing this comparison is just to show you that this is all the changes that we are bringing from FlutterFlow and not anything else. So each time that I do this like this, so I'm comparing the FlutterFlow branch to the live branch, and now you see this is all the changes that has been made. And we want to create pull request and then merge the pull request. When that is done, it's going to initiate that action, and if we refresh our website, we'll see that that page has been updated. So if I open here, this is our action that is running immediately, and when this action is done, we'll come here to this page and refresh, and let's see to make sure that this button will change. So I'm just going to refresh one more time to show you that everything stays the same. And this time, hopefully it's not going to take long as compared to the first time, because we also have caching enabled. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it. So it's much more because of the caching that we have enabled. It just improves the performance in a little bit, but yeah, that's the same experience that we get. So these changes has not come. Let's wait for it and monitor our deployment. So another thing you can do is, again, I'm not touching on that, I'm just trying to highlight just so you have a visibility. You can set another way to automate another action that immediately a change comes on FlutterFlow, it automatically pulls down to your live branch, just so everything is continuous. But that's not what we're talking about here in this video. And guys, please, if you like this video, be sure to check out my Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description. It's really a good way to support me. I really appreciate if you can check it out. And then I have all of these contents that like this material, all of these code snippets and whatnot, and some instructions be found on my Buy Me a Coffee, so that I can check that out. And then be sure to, yeah, it's a good way to support me. Again, hit the like button and subscribe. So the deployment is completed. Let's refresh this page to see the new change. Let's see. Okay, this is it. You see the button changes. Now, with your application successfully deployed, if you want to add a custom domain, all you need to do is head over to your Firebase console and click on Add Custom Domain. So you specify the domain here. Let me just say I want to do ffupdates.com, for example. Continue. And what it's going to ask me to is to like just configure these DNS records, right? It's going to give me some DNS records I need to configure. So I need to do A text and C text, and depending on whatever hosting provider that you are using, all you have to do is to head over there, create these values. Your project will be redirected to the one that you have hosted on Firebase. So that's all you need to do. And so for me, I use Namecheap. I'm not going to go through all of that process, but that's just the whole idea. You can look at the documentation on your hosting provider to see how you can create these two values or whatever values that it asks you to create. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video. Again, like I mentioned, a couple of these instructions and this code snippet will be available on my Buy Me a Coffee. You can check it out, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you like this video. Let me know what kind of things you would like to see. Thank you, Samuel David. Thank you, Enko Kyle, for those of you that are star seeds, for those that are currently supporting me, Buy Me a Coffee. And let me know what kind of videos you like me to do. And this video was very, very detailed and long intentionally, and that is because I wanted to explain as much details as I can that can help you. And please remember, when you're editing this file, be sure to, again, you can remove this path, right? If you don't need this path, you can remove it, just so every time that you push, it just pushes directly. But I recommend you leave it there, because those with my experience with the FlutterFlow breaks each time they release a new feature. These are the kind of things I want to prevent when you're deploying your application, just so you're on the safe side. So yeah, this file will be available and that you can use for free. Anyways, thank you guys very much once again, and see you in the next time.